A new report from researcher Mark Ledwich once again provides evidence debunking the myth of YouTube radicalization. But while I want to highlight some of his work, what I really want to focus on is the meaning of left and right, because it doesn't seem to make sense anymore and everything's kind of falling apart. We no longer have a shared reality in trying to define what is or isn't. So let me point something out to you. Mark Ledwich actually collected data disproving the YouTube radicalization narrative. For one, he mentions the New York Times piece written by Kevin Roose that claims that this guy was radicalized to the alt-right. In fact, the story presents the complete opposite. The New York Times wrote a story about a conservative who was exposed to the intellectual dark web and then became a progressive, yet for some reason the New York Times wrote the opposite. Now, most of you who are watching this know that radicalization is a myth, and I'll tell you why in very simple terms. I don't need to actually go through his data, but bless his heart for actually producing it with a researcher from Berkeley, of all places. The reality is, YouTube radicalization makes literally no sense. There is a gigantic logical leap that these people in the media, the Daily Beast, NBC, BuzzFeed, Columbia Journalism Review, the New York Times, they make this dramatic leap that makes no sense. At what point did they decide that YouTube understands the political difference between pro and anti-immigration? They don't. YouTube doesn't. Let me explain something to you. The argument presented by the media is that if you watch, say, a video about immigration, you'll be fed more videos about immigration, thus radicalizing you to the far right. You know why that makes no sense? YouTube doesn't doesn't have an extremism gradient. YouTube doesn't say immigration is -1, immigration bad is -2, immigration really bad -3, and then actually walk you down a path. It makes no sense. If you watch a video about immigration, you are equally likely to receive mainstream media or alternative, or YouTube creators. It could be pro or anti. YouTube doesn't know the difference of whether or not something is good or bad. Now, there are certain keywords that can exist and certain channels that can exist. So if you naturally choose to watch a specific channel, you will get more of it. To that extent, there is, to some degree, a rabbit hole in that you might become a fan of a particular channel or creator. But if you choose to start hating on a group of people, it's a choice you made because people have their own minds. Perhaps you watch a video about immigration. You then see a video that says immigration good, immigration bad. You have to choose which to watch. So no, YouTube isn't this great radicalization engine. It's an engine of anything. And I'll give you a better example. Do you know anybody who's become, say, like a Spider-Man extremist? Like anybody who's like running around believing they're Spider-Man and obsessed, they got everything as Spider-Man now, they become extremists? No. Just because you watch Spider-Man videos doesn't mean YouTube will specifically feed you crazy extremist content about Spider-Man. They're gonna feed you general cartoons about Spider-Man. It won't be better or worse. YouTube doesn't know the difference. No one's become a Dragon Ball Z extremist. Now you might argue, yes, but they're fans of Dragon Ball Z. Right, because they liked it, they chose to watch it, and they watch more of it. So what you're really saying is not that YouTube radicalizes people, but that people who already have a set of beliefs will watch more of the content in which they already believe. The fact of the matter is, it is possible to a certain degree, but they make it seem like people are being trapped by this when in reality, it's people choosing to watch the content they already agree with. And if you disagree with it, you will leave. In fact, the New York Times story shows the opposite. But here's the main point, okay? I don't want to rant on this. The point is, you'll notice that these sources claiming that there's a radicalization engine are all left-wing. Why, yes, simply by saying the engine doesn't exist, Mark Ledwich is now right-wing. I'm not kidding. Let me show you something. What really blows my mind with all of this is that you have people constantly trying to debunk something without evidence. Mark Ledwich produced a data set. He's got graphs and graphics showing you the flow of media where Armored Skeptic, will send you if you watch his content, notably to more Armored Skeptic. And he is a YouTube creator. Let's do the standard group. He is a centrist, I suppose they put him as. That means if you watch him, here's what you're gonna get. You're gonna get a variety of content. You're gonna get Last Week Tonight at some point. That's who he feeds into. He has actual data, yet people try to claim he doesn't. But here's what happens. Because Mark Ledwich accurately called out the media for pushing, without evidence, a narrative, this guy who's trying to debunk the actual, look at this. This is an actual academic Cornell University paper published by a few people, academics. I believe Anna has a PhD, I could be wrong. But he tries claiming it's bunk. He's a Princeton professor. Okay, Arvind, I request that you humbly provide evidence debunking the narrative instead of making a claim without evidence, because as all of you know about Hitchens' razor, that which can be claimed without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. But notice he says this: the first author has been on a diatribe about the media, even in the thread introducing the paper. It doesn't undermine the paper by itself, but given that they disingenuously exclude how radicalization might work, it raises questions. Already, he's trying to lightly poison the well. If you oppose the media narrative, you must be, I don't know, right-wing. Here's the point. What I find particularly interesting with the assessment by Mark, I don't blame him for this. I don't know how else you'd put it. Looking up Tim Pool, you get right. Anti-SJW, AIN. I think anti-SJW and AIN, AIN is arbitrary. It was made by that one researcher. You can also see how almost all of my content feeds to Fox News, which is complete BS, and then Last Night with Seth Meyers. Why is it that if you watch my content, you go to Fox News? Why should Fox News be promoted? First of all, my opinions are fairly moderate. The reason he lumps me in with the right-wing group is because of the way he categorizes left and right. And this presents a fundamental problem for his study and basically any other study. Do I have it? I thought I had it pulled up already. Anyway, here we go. Partisan Right are channels mainly focused on politics and exclusively critical of the Democrats and supporting Trump. I would say I don't really provide support for Trump other than I don't think he's like the reincarnation of Hitler. I think he's a bad guy, but I think he was right on the economy, and you have to admit when he's right because all of the press says it. Am I supposed to lie? Am I supposed to say, no, the economy's bad and just side with the Democrats and even disagree with left-wing Vox? But it is true that I'm also almost entirely critical of Democrats. But he says this: the partisan left is focused on politics exclusively critical of Republicans. The problem is it doesn't work. Jimmy Dore says a lot of the same things I do, except he's pretty pro-Bernie. If you look at Jimmy Dore's channel, I think I have it pulled up, and Jimmy Dore's awesome, by the way. I mean, obviously, we agree on a lot of things. You can see impeachment helps Trump and Dems don't care. Jake Tapper blames the media. Trump not legally impeached. A lot of the same things I say and a lot of support for Tulsi Gabbard. The problem comes not because he's wrong to say that. He says my main channel is right-wing, but he says that this channel is actually centrist. The problem comes, it's based on like perception, I guess. No sane person is going to call Jimmy Dore right-wing, right? But me and Jimmy say the exact same things for the most part. I guess Jimmy's much more anti-Trump. I wouldn't say I've never directly supported him. I've expressed my intent to vote against him. I've expressed my support for Tulsi. So here's what I want to make clear. Two things. My criticism is not about his classification of me. I think he did his best. Mark and Anna, they did their best to classify individuals, and I honestly don't care what you call me. The problem is that even Mark himself is right-wing simply for pushing back against the mainstream media narrative. So right now, you have a problem. I've said over and over again, impeachment will help Trump. I was correct. It did. I've said Trump's approval rating will go up, and it has. I've said, Trump is going to raise record money. He did. Is it right-wing to claim that it is? The answer is yes. And therein lies the big problem. There's no political understanding of what left and right really means anymore. So I can show you this. Here's allsides.com. They've tried to quantify what left and right really means. The reason I think this is important is because me and Jimmy Dore can agree on 90% of everything and produce 90% of the same content with the same framing, criticizing the Democrats, saying impeachment is helping Trump, praising Tulsi Gabbard, etc. Yet there is a perceptual difference as to why he would be considered left-wing by the mainstream media and I would be considered right-wing. It makes no sense. It's all about framing, I guess. I don't know. The reason I bring this up is because I've tried to figure out, what would I have to do to convince someone I'm not a Republican or a conservative? I'm very critical of the Democrats, almost entirely so, because I think the Republicans are doing what they've always done, and it's boring to me. I'll put it this way. I grew up in Chicago, surrounded by Democrats who are lying and cheating, and I can't stand them when they do it. I've also seen what they did to Bernie Sanders. I now see Bernie Sanders pandering. It all makes me very angry. I don't feel betrayed by the Republicans. I feel betrayed by the Democrats. Naturally, I'm going to criticize them, and I'm also going to try and make them course correct. How do I then tell people my political positions align with the all sides left? It doesn't matter. And that's when I realized it a long time ago. Like, this is why I ultimately don't care. You can call me whatever you want. I think it was funny because one researcher said, whatever Tim Pool is, that's how she described me, fine. But when we're trying to figure out what the left and the right is in the United States, I think it's fair to say there isn't one anymore. Barack Obama voters who voted for Trump, Bernie voters who voted for Trump, are they right-wing? I don't know. I don't think it matters anymore. I don't think the words mean anything. Mark Ledwich is not a political actor. He's a researcher. But his narrative aligns with the right. Does that make him right-wing? I have no idea. Here's what they say. Check this out. Government services. Do you believe in that? I do. That's a left-wing. Federal laws to protect consumers. I agree. Federal laws protecting equal rights. I agree. I'm only critical when they overstep or dissolve those rights. As I've pointed out in most of the videos about the expansion of trans laws, is that they're ill-defined. They say tax increases on the wealthy. I've made several videos talking about that. Government regulations. Yep. Pro-choice. You betcha. Decrease military spending and intervention. 100%. It's why I backed Tulsi Gabbard. A belief in the role of government to provide for its people and suffering and contribute to human prosperity. I don't know about that. I guess to a certain degree. Whatever. Anyway, you get the point. I don't want to read through all this. They do add a few things I disagree with, like banning hate speech. But when you go to the right-wing side, I don't line up with most of this stuff. I agree with freedom of speech, personal responsibility, but not with, government should be small and non-intrusive. No, not really. I'm a social liberal. So then we have, I guess, a political problem. Look, take a look at this. This is a Democratic Fund voter study group, and we can see the social identity dimension versus the economic dimension. And you can see that Trump's voters are split economically. This is what I want to highlight. There is no longer a shared reality of what left and right really is. People watch my videos. They think I'm a liberal. Some of them think I'm centrist. Some of them demand that I take the red pill. Some say I'm more conservative than I really am. Here's what it really comes down to and why I want to do this video. For one, I really wanted to highlight that the radicalization engine stuff is all bunk. But I want to point out this. Everybody watches someone they think is trustworthy. The people who watch me will believe me on my opinions, and they'll understand why I view the world the way that I do. I believe that I show, credible sources and back up all of my opinions. But take a look at this. This is a post from David Pakman 6 months ago. I'm sorry, not from Pakman himself, from his subreddit. Someone asked 6 months ago, can we just admit that Jimmy Dore is a toxic, useful idiot for the alt-right at this point? He even says this. At this point, I gotta say that he's literally destroying the left and kind of turned into a junior Tim Pool. Boy, do David Pakman's fans hate me. And I typically recommend David, even though I think he's wrong on a lot of things. And I think it's important to get a balanced view. Don't just watch my content. Yet that's not good enough for them. Fine, I don't care. What I really started to see is that from a mainstream political perspective, if you oppose the mainstream media, you're right-wing. That's one of the principal positions I have. If you're critical of Democrats, you're right-wing. Even if you don't like the Republicans. Initially, when Mark did his first round of research, he published it with, there was a left wing, there were the centrists, there was the right wing, but there was also a category called exclusively critical of left. And I was initially in that, and I disagreed. And I said, why? I've actually praised a lot of the left. I actually made a video praising Ocasio-Cortez's initial campaign platform. Just because most of my content is, but if you actually watch the videos, you'll see I have praise for a lot of left-wing ideas. So we eventually got rid of it. But even David Pakman's people are targeting Jimmy Dore, accusing him of being a junior Tim Pool. Now they go on to defend Jimmy, and then they go on to really excoriate me. Okay, fine, I don't care. Here's what the thing is. Underneath where I am is a mountain of news stories I've read that I believe are credible. This forms the basis of my worldview. The same is true for everyone else. If you watch my content, you've seen me show you the facts, the proof, the evidence, and so you believe it. Then when someone comes to you and says, here's evidence proving what you believe is wrong, you say, no way, I refuse, because I remember the 50 stories Tim Pool showed me disproving that narrative. It makes sense, right? You'd be stupid to just blindly believe one story after seeing 50 contradicting it. Herein lies the big problem. Take a look at this. This is a video from David Pakman. He says, crowd laughs at Ted Cruz conspiracy theory. In the video, David Pakman uncritically parrots the MSNBC narrative that there was no Ukraine meddling. Ted Cruz was actually correct, and I can prove it. Here's at least one article. Ukraine court rules Manafort disclosure caused meddling in U.S. election. If you believe the New York Times is pushing out factual information, then you would have to agree that a court in Ukraine itself said that officials meddled in the U.S. election. And this is just one story of many. David Pakman then publishes this story where he calls it a conspiracy theory, and Chuck Todd's audience laughs at Ted Cruz. The problem is, David Pakman just believed MSNBC was correct, and he believed the narrative about the conspiracy theory. I'm not blaming him. He has a worldview built upon all of the articles he reads and trusts. I think David Pakman is wrong. This is why I recommend you go and watch David Pakman. I also think he's wrong, but you shouldn't just take my word for it. Sometimes he's right as well. I think he does a pretty good job, actually. He's actually also agreed with Mark Ledwich's research, and so I think there are instances where I'm wrong and David is wrong as well. But here's the point. David Pakman's followers will accuse me of being a grifter and of being right-wing. It means nothing. I was correct. I was absolutely correct when I said Ted Cruz was correct. Simply because Ted Cruz is correct doesn't mean that I'm right-wing. And therein lies the main problem. MSNBC is lying. Jacobin Magazine has criticized Rachel Maddow. Glenn Greenwald has criticized Rachel Maddow. The reason I'm bringing this up is, honestly, I don't know too much about where we go from here and what the point will ultimately be. So I'll wrap this one up to keep it short. But the point is, the rabbit hole stuff is fake. That's the most important bit. But what I want to get to is that I don't think there's a left and a right wing anymore. I really, really don't. I think people who watch me trust me and think I'm, a moderate liberal. People who watch David Pakman believe David and think I'm an alt-right grifter or something. It doesn't matter. There's no mainstream understanding of what I am, of what David Pakman is, of what Jimmy Dore is. Jimmy Dore, no one in their right mind would call right-wing. I mean, the dude's basically a socialist, and I don't mean that as a pejorative. I mean, he's actually pretty socialistic, big fan of Bernie. No one in the right mind would call him right-wing, but he has the same criticisms of the Democrats that I do, that they're crony establishment elites. I just happen to be more of a centrist and want a more populist, moderate individual to try and bridge the divide. I think Tulsi has tried to do that. But Jimmy Dore also supports Tulsi Gabbard. So there is no understanding of who anyone really is. Left and right is meaningless. From this, I have no idea what to tell you other than call yourself whatever you want. Nothing matters. Politics are fractured in a million different ways, and I have no idea anymore. I really, really don't. I think it's fair to say I'm a centrist, or at least heterodox, because while I'm exclusively critical of the left, my political positions align with the left. But I don't know. And I don't care. I literally don't care. I have no idea what's going on. Everybody's lost their minds. People have a worldview built upon reading fake news. The media is pumping out fake garbage. Let me show you my favorite fake garbage from BuzzFeed. A man was stabbed to death in a fight over a Popeye's chicken sandwich. Literally never happened. A guy died for sure. Chicken sandwich fight? Sorry, never happened. It was a fight over someone cutting in line. That's about it. The family came out and said the chicken sandwich thing never happened, but BuzzFeed's a credible sourse, apparently. If I disagree with that, they'll say I'm right-wing. Why? Because BuzzFeed is left-wing. That's where we're at right now. There is no center. I'll tell you one more thing, too, I love. Here, let me pull up one other channel that I really do like. Miss June Shoeonhead is a centrist anti-SJW. June, she's super pro-Bernie. She's a democratic socialist. She's left. If you're not a democratic socialist, forgive me for calling you one. My understanding, though, is she's very pro-left in her policies, but anti-SJW because she's anti-authoritarian. She criticizes the authoritarian left, and she supports an anti-authoritarian left. But she's a centrist because of it. You see, the point is, if you take someone like Shu, who criticizes social justice, which is predominantly perceived as left, combined with politics that are overwhelmingly left, the only choice is that if you oppose authoritarianism, you're right-wing, nothing makes sense anymore. And that's really what I want to talk about. Because I'm trying to wrap my head around all this. And again, I don't know what the point is other than to say, no offense to Mark. I think he did the best job as he did. The fact is, there is no way to quantify the political leanings of most people because it makes no sense to call someone traditionally right-wing if all of their policies are progressive. They just disagree with the crony establishment Democrats and the social justice crowd. So here's what we get. I'll put it this way. I think you can easily quantify my main channel as Tim Pool for one reason. Perceivably, the Democrats are left-wing and the Republicans are right-wing. However, because I'm anti-SJW, even though I support literal social justice and left-wing policies, because I'm criticizing the Democrats and social justice, therefore it makes me right-wing, I guess. But June Shoeonhead similarly does the same. I guess then the only real issue is not that I am actually right-wing, but that because my channel particularly focuses on mainstream politics, that must be the case. No idea. So again, I want to say this. It's not to criticize Mark Ledwich. It's to point out the impossible task of trying to quantify what someone's political affiliation really is. I don't know what to tell you. I will tell you this, though. If you watch my channel, Tim Pool, YouTube is sending you to Fox News. Sure, you want to talk about radicalization? I'll blame YouTube for that one, because my opinions are to the left of Fox News, but we talk about the same thing. This disproves the radicalization narrative to an extent. My opinions are not identical. They're to the left of Fox News, but YouTube doesn't know anything about direction. Whatever, I'll leave it there. 20-minute rant over. You figure it out. The main point of the segment is I have no idea what's going on, other than the fact that the media often pushes a narrative without evidence, then claims you are a conspiracy theorist or right-wing if you push back on their fake news. Your only choice? Agree with the establishment press or be called right-wing. Welcome to politics in 2020. I have no idea what's happening. I'll see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thanks for hanging out.